Hey guys, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. I'm Ted, and today I'm hanging out with
Ryan.
Eric is Dave.
And today we asked the question why you shouldn't create your own RPG.
Before we get to that, head down in the description below where you can gain tips on RPGs from Nerdarchy as well as learn how to game with us.
Alright, so basically in our last week's wrap, or in a wrap some time ago, we talked about Nerdarchy not wanting to make our own RPG. We've been around for about 2.5 years as Nerdarchy, and people have asked us many times, you guys know what you're doing, why don't you make your own,
It was also construed as we were telling people not to make their own.
So the point of that video was not for us to say, you guys shouldn't make your own. You can do whatever you like. It was our opinion that we don't feel that we're inspired to actually come up with our own set of rules and make our own thing. Perhaps at some point in time, a rule set might come down the inspiration avenue, and we might go down that road. But at this juncture, we're happy with the rule sets that are out there, and until we can find a way to improve upon them majorly, there's no point in starting from scratch and doing our own game when there's so many other games that are so successful.
Yeah, I mean, and also too, like, there's no ifs, ands, or asses about it, right? Like, starting your own RPG is a commercial endeavor. Like, if you are going to go through the trouble of developing your own role-playing game, and you're gonna, unless you're just doing it as like a hobby and just for fun on the side, like, you're starting a business. So businesses fail or succeed, right? And at some point, you're going to have to pony up some money and resources and all the shitload of time it takes to develop your own individual role-playing game. And really, unless a rule set absolutely can't function to serve the thing that you want it to do, like, there isn't a ton of point in developing a whole cloth rule system unless you're like, okay, I've solidly pinpointed every single reason why my RPG should exist. So you kind of have to have a whole system of proofs of, like, all right, I know that this system can work, there's a hunger for it, maybe you do smaller, lighter playtests of it, but don't delude yourself into not understanding that it's a massive undertaking. Like, all the hours playtesting and the work that goes through it, like, developing your own individual role-playing game system, especially if you have a full-time job on top of that, you're looking at probably a 5 to 15 year endeavor, depending on the pace and the clip you go and the complexity of your rule set. So I think that's a thing that should be taken to mind. So it's just not something that should be taken on lightly.
And if you're talking about that kind of endeavor, what is the state of the role-playing community? How is that going to change over the course of 5 years, even if you do it on the smaller spectrum? Like, I don't imagine things changing majorly within 5 years, but 15, absolutely. I can guarantee you I'm a significantly different player than I was 15 years ago. The style of game that I run or that I play is immensely different.
I'm just thinking about, all right, so like the crest of zombies being super popular was like 2 to 3 years ago or whatever. Like, somebody as of that day deciding they wanted to start their own zombie-esque role-playing game, just like, all right, by the time it's done, nobody's gonna give a shit about zombies.
And they're all zombied out.
And then that's how markets go. Like, that's literally how businesses fall and collapse. Like,
so as you were saying, you have to ask the questions of, can I modify a rule set of something that's already out there and just make those changes to an existing rule set and allow my table to run with this?
Right, but that's not for a commercial endeavor. That's for what you're playing at home, with your friends or whatever.
Right.
So when we're talking about it, and GM Juice Lee, it really was. He felt we really were trying to destroy the dreams of coming in and up and coming
game designers,
and that's not what we're saying at all. Like, in business, right, when you're creating something, you have to fulfill a need or provide a service that isn't there already.
Or even if you make the thing that people didn't realize that they didn't want. Like, prior to Dungeons & Dragons emerging, like, how many people would have thought to do it? But then, like, adaptations of Chainmail, Dungeons & Dragons.
All the kids who play make believe.
Right.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, like, when if I was looking at developing my own RPG, I'd have to go, well, what niche isn't being served, or how can I service this fan base, this hobby, in a way that it's not being serviced right now. When I think about it, like, nothing comes into mind. I have no innovations to offer at this juncture. What might happen later?
Even if you like can hybridize some sets of rules, of like, oh, I kind of like the card mechanic that some games have, or like, so maybe you or the sort of the bennies system that Savage World has, or Fate where you have fudge dice type of thing. Like, maybe you figure out like a cool interplay of some of how these things work, but you also don't want this like Frankenstein mess of super complex rules.
That's probably what I would do if I was making something. Like, yeah, you were discussing with Juice, and like a part of the discussion that I gained from it was you're trying to say, well, before you start doing your own endeavor, there's so many open gaming licenses that you could actually cut your teeth using someone else's rules and mechanics to kind of become more adept at design.
Well, and it's building familiarity. It's even building like some name recognition too, because as people start to see your name and you get known to publishers and other industry people and just gamers in general, you're going to start to build trust with people as a person who designs games. Because if you've done a lot of product and for the most part it's been a lot of shit, well, you've a lot of that prior shit attached to you, and like people aren't going to trust your design logic. But eventually, if you do enough good product, then people are going to really like, oh, I should at least check out what this person's doing, even if eventually that is creating your own RPG system.
Well, that being said, like, I know of third-party publishers that put out some stuff that wasn't that great, and then they really got trashed for it.
Yeah.
But, you know, they got the benefit of learning from that experience and going, oh, well, you know, this is what I have to change, this is what I have to tweak. And I've seen them grow past that.
But how much, it depends on how much that experience could cost you financially, and can you weather that? You know, like, so that's a question of like, oh, I'm going to print all these books and like, oh, not enough of them sell, so I have a garage full of books that didn't sell, so I'm in the hole for that, and I don't have a garage anymore.
I feel like people starting out nowadays are going to go PDF.
Absolutely,
and it is a lot easier to do than ever before. The cost
is
isn't what it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still going to be costs associated with everything you do, especially, you know, unless you're going to do everything yourself, and then it really will take like 15 years. That you know, each job is a job unto itself, whether you're talking art, you know, the art direction, the editing,
book layout too, like layout and design. Like, if your book looks like the most basic PDF file document, that's piss poor publication. That doesn't look good. Do you want to look at things that are on the shelf and like, how can I approximate that as closely as possible given my means?
Now fortunately, like, you can buy templates and stuff that actually kind of like puts that together you a little bit, but
it's
you
not
still have
make
to work
miracles.
the layout. Yeah.
So, like, you know, for us, I feel if we were to, you know, go down that road, you know, we would be looking at doing supplements, looking at doing
well, we
like
are
settings.
doing supplements.
Well,
through our Patreon awards, we put together supplements every month for our patrons.
Right.
But that, you know, that's our way of, you know, dipping our toe in the water and checking out the industry and growing as designers.
But I mean, we could focus our efforts and actually, at some point in time, try to say, can we make like the setting of Chimes at Discordia, Griffin Gaff, however you want to refer to it.
Absolutely can't do that.
Absolutely can't do that.
Yeah, so like eventually, yeah, we're slowly building something out that is campaign world.
Right.
But again, we're using that under the 5e, because we can't call it Dungeons and Dragons. Using that under the 5e design logic, and because there's some semblance of an OGL, like, sure, there's certain monsters we can't use, or we have to call them something else. You know, or like all these sort of like it's like how the Tome of Peace has the Gear Forged. I mean, they're War Forged. So I think we should do the War Gears or the Gear Forged or something, or not.
Can we call them Gears of War?
War Gears, yeah, Gears of War. Nobody in the right mind would use that as a title for anything. So I think we're golden. Print it. Yeah.
And here's the other thing. Just for us personally, like, we enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons. We're starting to dabble with Cypher System, and I want to do more stuff with that. I would love to do more stuff with Fate. Mutants and Masterminds been a game I've always enjoyed. And, you know, the odd thing about every one of those games is they have an OGL of some form.
Right.
So like, there isn't really a whole... I don't have a need to build my own thing because I can have fun playing in other people's things.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. It's like a writer. Authors are told by other authors, if you're new into your career, just read a fuck ton. Well, if you're trying to be a designer for role-playing games, which if you're making your system, you have to play tons of hours of role-playing games to just see how the mechanics work and sort of pan out. And eventually maybe you'll have this sort of Einstein moment where the apple falls on your head and you're like, oh, this is a thing that should exist in role-playing games. Like basically we're trying to give people the idea of sort of best practices of if you have the idea of maybe eventually I want to be a role-playing game designer, how I or we would go about it is the kind of the path we set forward of playing somebody else's sandbox before you build your own, and then eventually when you understand the full-on construction of the sandbox, then maybe you start to think about doing that.
Well, and see, that being said, if you're that passionate about doing your own thing and creating your own idea, and you have something great and revolutionary in your mind, go for it, do it. It'll work or it won't. We're just giving you guidance from our viewpoint and how we would handle it, and you never know. Like, we have a friend who is designed a tabletop game, and like this was the game in his mind. This was the game he was making. He started, he got introduced to us. We introduced to him to other game designers for tabletop, and what he realized, this is the game I love, but it's not the game I can make right now.
Yeah.
So
it's like the Batman thing.
Yeah,
yeah.
So he came up with a completely new game that's going to be kickstarted in probably a couple months, and he's moving down that road. And even Cardboard Fortress, who created. They're kind of like their baby is Kobolds, which is a really fun game.
It's been lingering in like production hell for like 2.5, 3 years.
But they said, well, this isn't going to happen right now, and we'll come back to it. And they put out Resistor, which was successful.
It's a much lighter game, yeah.
And they kickstarted, and now they have Laser Riders. That game is a ton of fun to play, and that game, it looks like it's going to be kickstarted soon as well, and I hope that one does well, because so far that might be my favorite game from them.
And here's the thing about them sort of starting off small, like, so they would end having a ton of experience with they were playing a ton of tabletop board games, and various types of games, like pretty much weekly. Every week they had like a board game night or two.
Even more than that, they do something called Unpub, where a bunch of game designers or wannabe game designers get together, or up and coming game designers get together. Wannabe sounds kind of negative. But they would meet, like, I don't know, monthly, and they would basically brainstorm game design and making games and going back and forth. And I think they even like started their own group that was kind of
they have that meets at least once a month, maybe twice a month in Philly. But again, like, so groups of people get together and play test their games with one another, kind of get some feedback and some critique on what's going on. But also too, like, Resistor was a game that there was like a game jam that would happen at this design studio, and so the seeds of Resistor started from a game that, like, they kind of scrawled on index cards or something to that effect, and it became what Resistor eventually became. So, like, but it was also, they had a ton of experience, a ton of doing before they try and go and make a big game. Like, they made a lot of smaller games right now, and like Resistor picked up a publisher, so they're getting published through, for the board game industry, a known publisher. And then the same thing is happening with Laser Riders. They found a publisher that was interested in what they're doing. Unfortunately, Kobolds is a much bigger game, and it's like a bigger ambition for them.
Right. But so, the analogy is the same whether you're designing tabletop games or RPGs. Is they went through this process of growing into the people that could make the game they wanted to make, and multiple games. They didn't just wake up one morning and go, "Oh, I'm going to build this game and then I'm going to sell it." No, there's a lot of work that went into it, years in the making.
Yeah. Yes. Well, but for role playing games, though, I mean, some games are different from others as far as the frequency with which you play them. But when you think about a role playing game, you have to think of a game that people are going to enjoy playing for like years straight, right? Like, absolutely, every weekend or once a month or whatever. But even so,
like, hours at a time.
Whereas a tabletop board game, it's like, all right, you might play that game for an hour once every other month or something like that. So the investment's a lot lower. So, like, even though like tabletop role-playing games aren't a super expensive hobby to get into, the time investment is huge. So you have to make a rule set people are just going to love. and that's a hard task.
And still be unique and still
Have a reason to really exist,
Yes.
right?
So, and it's gotta fulfill that niche that's missing, or have something that's so innovative that it's just not out there, and people are like, I'm gonna want to do this.
Yeah.
Like another analogy is Bruce Lee, right? Bruce Lee, created Jeet Kune Do, right? But you know why he created it? Because the guy that was teaching him Wing Chun stopped teaching him, and the Chinese would not touch him and would not teach him anymore because he was teaching Americans. He didn't actually want to make that system. He wanted to keep learning what he was doing, but because he had no choice, he had to go out and then start learning from everybody that he could learn from, and then he formed this thing.
Created an amalgam system, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all about paying your dues, knowing why you want to do what you're going to do, and then go for it. Like if that's what you want to do, we don't want to discourage you. I'd like to encourage you to do it. Just have a realistic view of how these things kind of work.
Right.
And have a better reason than, whenever someone says I want to do something just to be different, that's not generally a good reason.
Yeah.
It's got to be a little more a little deeper than that.
Yeah. Like, maybe you do design a game system with like counter rolls or whatever, because it's like, well, I think this game's going to focus on fencing, and the other opposing player should have a chance to parry the blow or whatever.
You want something that's more similar.
It's very simulationist towards like sword fighting. I mean, I wouldn't want to play that game because I hate games that it takes 4 rolls to resolve what actually happened. But maybe for some people, they're super into that sort of thing.
Right, like that's a need that they feel they have and other people have, but it's not being met.
Right, exactly.
So, I don't know. You guys let us know in the comments below. What do you think about creating new RPGs? Do we need 1 million more? While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can check out the articles over on nerdarchy.com.
While you're there, you can also get some sweet Nerdarchy swag.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.